Well, I think one of the things also that got Michael's attention was this recent stream with David Wood when I think he went on Need God's channel, and they were making certain claims about images. So I guess we can like react to this clip here, and then Michael, whenever you want to jump in, just jump in.
Yeah, sounds good.
The Council of Nicaea II, which happened in 787, said this: to those who do not kiss the holy and venerable images, anathema. So, David, if we don't
Amen.
go up to these pictures that they've got in their churches and kiss them, then we are anathema. Anathema is nothing less than complete separation from God.
This is like one of the incredulity lines that they like to use a lot. And like, Cleve, I think you are knowledgeable on that one.
I used it all the time, but it comes from the same place. So, what's his face? The guy we were just talking about forever ago, the Lutheran, the guy that was in a,
The Lutheran?
Cooper. Yeah.
Cooper.
Shooping, that guy. Yeah. So
pooping.
he compiled a quote mine with a lot of these like, oh, it's so mean, like quotes or whatever. So a lot of these guys will run with that. I was reviewing Need God's video with David Wood, and I noticed what Need God does. He steals his stuff from, like, he'll Google and he'll steal his stuff from quote mines word for word with the citation included. So he took this from some of the quotes he was taking from the Gospel Coalition website, which took their quotes from Gavin Ortland's video. Yeah. So it wouldn't shock me that he's just Googling best refutation of orthodoxy or something. He's like watching Shooping's video. Oh, he said Nicaea is bad. Okay, I'll take this quote.
Well, and I think there's a big difference between just kind of, looking for one-liners that are just kind of convenient versus like really trying to actually understand what's being said. And I think that this is really like the test of whether someone is pursuing the truth or not, is a willingness to like seriously look at what the other side has to say, really try to digest it, even maybe inhabit it a little bit, like try and understand it almost from the inside to a certain extent. And then from that more internal perspective of like seeing the interrelation of different beliefs in a worldview, to then try and actually, if you can then still mount an apologetic against it, that's a much stronger position to be coming from. And so in this case, these quotes from Second Nicaea are, I think, very widely misunderstood. I don't want to downplay the fact that, yes, the understanding of anathema, it does involve an actual pronouncement of the fact that someone has alienated themselves from God. But speaking of it in terms of it being something that is kind of imposed or that causes the person to be separated from God, it's probably a little bit of a misunderstanding, because the belief is that one has already alienated oneself through heresy. This is more of like an acknowledgement and a discipline, and it is meant to restore someone. It's meant to bring to someone's awareness like how distant they have run from the Savior. Now, obviously, people that are coming from this, coming from a Protestant perspective and looking at this, they will think that it sounds kind of insane to anathematize people for doing something that looks like a violation of the second commandment. So I feel like it does require a little bit of work to kind of explain what's actually going on here. And one thing that has to be kept in mind is that Second Nicaea it's not just some sort of abstract set of principles or something. It's a concrete response to decades of iconoclasm in the church, to the destruction of holy images, which I'll just break the news to those that are anti-icon. Those have been there since day one. And it's a rejection, therefore, of what was originally there and what was handed down. It's a rejection of the things that had been treasured and that were precious to the people of God since the apostolic age. It's not talking about your grandmother who is a Baptist. Now, it may have a kind of distant or indirect application to people that are like modern Protestants, but the actual people that are being addressed by the anathemas of Second Nicaea are the iconoclasts of that time. Those are the people that are being directly addressed by it.
Yeah.
And to see that this is the case, all you have to do is just look at some of the other anathemas. Like one of the anathemas is anathema to anyone who says that someone other than Christ our God has delivered us from idols. Now, like, what is that even talking about? Why would someone think that someone other than Christ delivered us from idols? Well, one of the claims being floated around was that the iconoclast emperors had delivered the people of God from an ancient and long-standing idolatry, an obsession with holy images. That was one of the things the iconoclasts were claiming, is that some of their emperors were actually the deliverers from images to the people of God. The anathema, therefore, it's pretty clear that it's not just talking about like anyone who has questions about icons or something. It's talking about the iconoclasts as a movement, as like a concrete, specific historical group. Now, the person who just grows up in total ignorance of that and has never heard of iconoclasm and never sorted these issues out or really seriously considered them, the anathema, it's not being directly applied to them. It's not addressed to them.
If I could just add a little bit there, that's like the same principle in court, right? Where like if you go to file a lawsuit, you have two parties to the lawsuit. The judge will issue a ruling, and then the principle in the ruling gets applied to like all the case law there, like, and then sorted through based on authority, whatever. That applies like that, whatever. Let's say it's an anathema. Let's say the judge anathematizes someone on this basis. That applies to that person. To anathematize someone else requires another ruling to anathema them, right? So it's like the principle is anathema, and like these people are anathema. For it to apply to them, you need like another decision. It's not a magic trap card, like Cleve.
If you don't mind if I chime in, anathemas are setting the boundaries of the church, right?
Yeah.
So somebody who's already outside of the church, you're already in the same situation regardless.
What are you worried about?
So, but people get tripped up. People get tripped up with this language. So what he's quoting there is he's quoting the letter to the Empress Irene, which is in the Minutes of Nicaea too. And what he's talking about, or what the letter is stating, is it's defining this term anathema as nothing less than complete separation from Christ. But what is it talking about? It's talking about Christ in his theanthropic body, the church. So this is a concept. This is why when Jonathan Pageau was saying on his expos, he's like, it's hard to detangle some of these concepts for especially evangelicals, because they have no concept of church. They have no concept of the sacraments, right? They can't even imagine that somehow their like grape juice and cracker isn't actually, somehow valid. But yeah, I think that's helpful to understand when it's saying complete separation from Christ. It's not saying that we're saying, oh, in every single situation, the Holy Spirit only operates within the church. We're saying it's a separation from Christ and his theanthropic body, which is the church. So,
yeah, yep. And I think that for those that are shocked by the anathemas of Second Nicaea, I think that it's good to go through a mental adjustment process, because I think part of the shock is even hearing an anathema at all, hearing any viewpoint being anathematized at all, because that's not something that evangelical Protestants are accustomed to. One of the things that needs to really be grappled with is the more root question of, does the church even have the authority to do this? And the New Testament teaches that the church has authority to do this. Right. So I think it's better to revisit the question of the anathemas of Second Nicaea after one has fully embraced with open eyes that the New Testament church and the Ante-Nicene and early church before 787, right? Already had a self-understanding of being able to anathematize. And once that initial shock is over, then you have to ask the question, okay, well, so this sounds offensive, but might there even be a reason? Might there be a reason? The other thing I would add is it may seem crazy that people would be told that they are separated from God because of their refusal to, in some manner, acknowledge or interact with holy images. But that's actually not crazy. That is actually something that happens within the scriptures. A refusal to interact with holy things, holy signs and representations, a refusal to interact with those things in the proper manner does actually lead to physical death in many cases in the scriptures, and serves as a kind of type or foreshadowing of spiritual death that comes from failing to interact with God in the new covenant according to the proper symbols. Think the Eucharist and the destruction that comes upon a person who receives it, God forbid, in an unworthy manner.
Right.
If you think back to, three major examples that come to mind are the cups in the book of Daniel. Is that the court of? Can you remind me? Is it Darius?
I think it's
or
Belshazzar.
Belshazzar. The improper handling of these vessels,
Yeah.
which are part of the tabernacle system, which is described as shadows and copies.
Yep.
You can laugh at the idea that it's a symbol or an image, but that doesn't mean it's not a symbol or an image, Other Paul. And then the other examples that are really pertinent to this are the Ark of the Covenant and the destruction of, I believe it's Uzziah, who touches the Ark in an improper manner.
And dies by holiness. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the other one that I would mention is the bronze serpent image, which some people don't know what to do with this. There's some Orthodox people that are reticent to talk about the bronze serpent image because it does get destroyed by righteous King Hezekiah, Saint Hezekiah, later on. But in its initial creation, it was a design that was given to Moses by God. And he was specifically instructed to create it as a means of protection, as an apotropaic image, you might even say a wonder-working icon, to use a phrase Father Andrew and Father Stephen used in Lord of Spirits one time to describe it. It's a wonder-working icon that preserved people from destruction, that preserved people from death. And with that one in particular, failure to look at this type of the Son of God, failure to look at it, resulted in your death and destruction. The eyes were this means of spiritual connection with God in this case, this means of, you might even say, supplication. Because, in looking at the image, you're implicitly asking God to protect you. There's nothing about the image itself, just considered entirely on its own, that would be necessarily salvific, right? So there's some kind of prayer being directed to God through the act of looking at this thing. And not doing so, that's physical destruction. This is the same bronze serpent image which our Lord himself says in John 14 was a foreshadowing of his own death upon the cross. And, to go even deeper into that verse, this is a very interesting thing to consider. This is something that I really think that Protestants need to grapple with.
Be right back, Alex.
They only think about the fact that the bronze serpent image was destroyed because later on it was given the name Nehushtan, and because incense was offered to it. And of course, that is to treat it as an idol. But if you think about how it was treated before, and if you consider the words of Christ himself, this image was venerated. It was venerated as an icon in its proper use when it was created by Moses and used by the children of Israel. It was destroyed later because it took on an idolatrous use. What Christ says in John 3:14 is, as Moses lifted up the snake in the wilderness, so also must the Son of Man be lifted up. The word that's used for lift up there, it's not, it doesn't mean just
hoisting something.
Right. It's not just talking about physical position. I believe the Greek word is hypsuo, and it's the same word or a variation on it that's used both when Christ says, as the Son of Man was lifted up, and when it speaks of the bronze serpent image itself. The Greek word that is kind of conjugated, forgive me, I don't know Greek, into these two instances in John 3:14. It also shows up repeatedly in the Synoptic Gospels and is basically always translated exalt. So it basically gets translated exalt. So whoever humbles himself will be exalted. Whoever exalts himself will be humbled.
Yeah, well, here is just a little search on Bible Hub. It says, I raise on high, I lift up, I exalt, I set on high.
This is talking about status, first and foremost, not position.
Yeah.
And this corresponds exactly to the exaltation of the precious and life-giving cross in the Orthodox Church. This is the Old Testament type of that feast. This is the Old Testament type of the honor of the cross, the lifting up of the cross for our protection in order to supplicate God that we still continue to practice to this day. The one who wants to say that the scriptures reject the veneration of images needs to give a convincing explanation of why Jesus says in John 3:14 that this image, while it was being used properly, was exalted, and that this is a fitting foreshadowing of his own exaltation on the cross.
Right.
And I invite people to try to respond to that. And it's not just that this is something that is believed in the scriptures and taught by Christ. It also shows up in the earliest interpretations of the bronze serpent incident that we have in church history. The two earliest interpretations we have, and they seem to be part of a continuous tradition, because the wording is very close. It's very similar. The two earliest instances are the Epistle of Barnabas, which is either late 1st or early 2nd century, and St. Justin Martyr in the mid 100s. And the Epistle of Barnabas, I've mentioned this before on your channel, Alex, that like there's a lot of stuff in there that it says about the bronze serpent, that it was a type of Christ who was to suffer, for one thing, and of the cross. So it's like a twofold, it's a type of both. There's a pole, and then there's the image mounted on it. It also speaks of how the glory of Jesus was revealed in these events. It even references the instruction to not make idols. And it says that the reason that this image was legitimate to make was precisely because it was a foreshadowing of the economy of Christ in the flesh. It was a foreshadowing of the fact that Christ would be visible in the flesh and could therefore be depicted in this kind of pre-icon on that basis. And then the other thing that's really interesting that it says, two other things. It says that the one who approached this image in faith was healed, and the one who did not would be destroyed. Well, the idea of approaching an image in faith in order to receive healing, like if that's not veneration, I don't know what that is. Like, what are you going to call that? There's some kind of a request to God through the image that's implicit in that interaction. And lastly, I would mention that one of the things that the Epistle of Barnabas says about the bronze serpent image is that it was set up in a prominent place. But if you actually look at the Greek, it uses the word endoxa or something like that. It was raised up in glory. This could have just as easily have been translated, it was raised up in honor. So there we see that connection between Christ our God and what he said about this type of himself, connection between what he's saying about it, and it looks like a seamless tradition where it's the same teaching is being handed down and presented by the second generation of Christians. And then with St. Justin Martyr, he says, you guys. With St. Justin Martyr, he says a lot of the same things. He talks about it being he talks about it being set up in the holy place. So he talks about being set up in the tabernacle, which is itself a form of veneration, to set something up in a position of honor in a holy place. And then he also talks about how it was necessary to look at the image and be saved by it. If that's not proto-iconodual, I don't know what is. Like being like...
sounds like full-on iconodual.
Yes. It's actually more extreme than even how we talk about icons now.
Yes.
And then there's another really interesting thing that St. Justin Martyr says about it is he calls it, and he actually uses the word icon. He calls it the icon of the crucified Jesus. So that is a lot of Nicaea II stuff showing up in the 100s. This sounds very similar to the kinds of things that Orthodox people would say about holy images. And I think that this also helps, get us started in seeing that these claims that the early church was aniconic. I think this comes from like a lack of curiosity. Like that's what it comes from. Like look deeper. Even if you're not a languages guy, I'm not a languages guy, but for goodness sake, I can at least look at a Greek word and be like, how is this Greek word used in these passages in the Synoptics? How is it used in John 3:14? And sometimes you find some gold while you're looking through all of this stuff. I encourage the people that are troubled by things like what needgod.net said. I encourage them to actually look more deeply into these things and to be surprised. The scriptures, they actually support the veneration, the creation and veneration of holy images, and it's part of the continuous unbroken theology of the Orthodox Church from the first century onward. And Alex, if you want to go back to that video and keep going, we can keep going too.
Yeah, absolutely. But real quick, Peter says, give us some bubbles, Alex. Guys, I'm out of bubble mix. It took like 2 streams. And I have no bubble mix left. So
It's over.
I was going to say, thank you. Thanks to Israel. Now I can buy more bubble mix and you can have like limitless bubbles. It's great.
We love Israel.
We love Israel. Father Timothy says Protestants reading themselves into the anathemas just like they read themselves into the scriptures. Well, I mean, guys, don't you know that like the early church was some like Pentecostal gathering, right?
You know, I mean, well, before we go back into this video, I think something that's helpful for Protestants, especially evangelicals, I don't think they've really thought through this stuff very much. I mean, maybe if you get into like your more like the restless and reformed guys, like these guys have probably, you know, they've got their heels dug in a bit. But your average like mom, dad, or whatever that attends the evangelical church, they haven't really thought through this very much. But I mean, just look at like, you kiss the cross you wear. Like, do you do that? Like, if you like your grandma passes away, do you kiss the image of that? I mean, this is very natural to us. Do you like you know, put your hand over your heart for the, you know, so on and so forth? Do you salute the flag? Like, what do you do? Like, do you do these things? These are all forms of veneration. So just smooch the picture. Just smooch it. Come on. It's not that hard.
Ortho Indian says, not gonna lie, Cleve looks great with the broccoli here in the thumbnail. Well,
dude,
the more super chats we get, the easier it is to send him to Turkey to get the broccoli haircut.
That's right. Come on, guys. You're gonna notice one day I come on the stream with a beanie on because I got the plugs, dude. I got the hair plug. I'm gonna bring my hairline down to like right here, so it looks freaking absurd.
It's the strongest hairline ever.
Yeah, exactly. Straight across. I'm not even going to fill it in this way, just straight across like this.
We're completely separated from God, David. If we do not go up to these pictures, bow down before the pictures, kiss them, show this affection to these pictures, something which is violation of the second commandment. You shall not make for yourself a carved image or any likeness of anything in heaven above or that's in the earth beneath. You shall not bow down to them or serve them.
Okay, so like on that, I don't think they realize that like in the actual text, it doesn't say like first commandment, this, second commandment, that, third commandment. It's just like, you shall have no other gods before me. I am the Lord your God. You shall have no gods before me. You shall not have idols. You will not bow down to them. You will not worship them. They're connected. This is like a point that I made against Luke where he's like, doesn't it say to not bow down to any image? I was like, yes, as God. Right. Otherwise, if you read it that way, then they shouldn't be bowing down to the ark. They shouldn't be bowing down to the tabernacle. They shouldn't be bowing down to the temple. What do you see? They're bowing down to all of those things, and it's just fine.
I mean, that's the problem with the evangelical kind of hermeneutic there, is they just pick apart passages and read them completely out of context from the surrounding text. I mean, this is absurd. This is like I was talking to, I have these phone calls with the inquirers or whatever, because, you know, they're like, hey, you went through the same thing. You were evangelical pastor. How did you work through this? And this kind of stuff comes up quite a bit. But one example of like this disconnect that they have with this particular topic, I mean, sometimes it's as simple as literally just pointing out how absurd the objection is. Like if you get like take a step away from what you've been taught and like drilled into your brain in your evangelical Sunday school. Like, you're telling me you think God's going to send you to hell for giving a picture a smooch. Like that's the God you worship. You think he's going to send you to hell for, whoa, that's too far.
Oh no.
That's too far. All that, you know, all those substances and things you do, whatever, all the lies you tell, you know, all of the hatred you have in your heart. Who cares about those things? You smooched a picture, dude. It's over for you.
Over.
Like,
you're a goat now.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like sometimes that's all it takes. But an example of them taking stuff out of context, like the concept of sola fide, especially if you were to talk to like a free grace or a guy that holds like once saved, always saved, if you were to view their view of salvation, this kind of light switch type situation, how do you make sense of other passages in the Bible, like you will be saved through childbearing?
That's such a good argument, dude.
Explain that to me. Like, how does that fit within your paradigm? I would like Ryan to explain that verse to me. What does he think that means? I'd be interested to hear his response.
No, I guess save doesn't actually mean save. It's probably something he would have to. This is what they do, right? This is their shtick. They redefine terms and they obfuscate. So.
Well, yeah, and in this case, I think, anyone who wants to apply the second commandment to iconography has a major uphill battle. I mean, you have to deal with the fact that the word for image that's there, both in the Masoretic and the Septuagint, is a word that it's not just image in general. It's much more specifically cult, statue, or idol. These things were really were understood by the majority of pagans as the actual bodies of gods. They were understood as actually being the living embodied presences of these lower level divine beings that would consume sacrifices through them being burnt up in front of the image on a little table called an altar, right? So they think these things needed houses to live in and clothes to wear. They thought that they were alive. And this is even connected to the word for you shall not bow down and serve them. The word for serve there, it has this kind of agricultural connotation. It's related to the word for Adam tilling and keeping the garden in Genesis 2. So there's something kind of nutritive about it. It's like giving nutrition to something. Now, that's just not talking about all acts of honor, for one thing. And we're not even talking about all images here. So you need to really stretch it just from the words themselves. You need to really stretch it to see this as applicable to things other than idols. And then you have to deal with the fact that there's divine instruction to create a multitude of images, very ornate images, in fact, in the tabernacle. Now, if that's the case, then the second commandment, as it's identified, cannot possibly be a rejection of all. It can't even be a rejection of all sculpture. It's not a rejection of all images. But if it's not a rejection of all images, then it's also not a rejection of the veneration of all images or of acts of honor being done towards all images. Because if the subject of the commandment begins with idols and it says don't make them, what are you going to say? That it changed the subject halfway through and now suddenly it's talking about all images when it says not to bow to them? It doesn't make any sense. So and then Alex, I think you're right to point out that the temple and the ark, they get described as receiving proskinesis. That's actually the verb that's used in the Septuagint version, and they are identified as images. They're shadows and copies of the heavenly things.
Yeah, it's Hebrews 8. Yeah,
and it's there in Exodus 2. Even in the text itself, it talks about them being images.
Yeah. Build this thing as you saw it on the mountain.
And I think everyone intuitively gets that there's more going on here than just the ark being the place where God stood. Yes, it is that, but the reason that it was a fitting place for God to stand is because it bore some kind of symbolic resemblance to the actual mode in which God revealed himself. He revealed himself within a cloud of angels. He revealed himself between angels. He's repeatedly described as descending from on high, held up by cherubim. And so it can't be that it can't just be like, oh, this is the place where God revealed himself. He just chose to reveal himself here. That's why we honor it. That's why we treat it the way we do. It was fitting for God to reveal himself there because it corresponds to the actual way in which he showed himself to the people. And then, you really have to grapple with the text doesn't say, exalt ye the Lord our God, worship towards him upon the footstool. It doesn't say that. It says exalt ye the Lord our God and worship at his footstool, worship towards his footstool. I'm okay with saying, of course, I think that act of honor, that proskinesis, was ultimately directed to God. But the author picked the footstool as a fitting stand-in. there's an assumption that what is given to the footstool is given to the Lord, that the honor given to the image passes to the prototype. The ark was an aniconic icon. It partially reveals and points to the presence of God by his absence between the two throne guardians. There's no idol statue in the middle like with pagan arks.
Yeah, well, this is something that like I brought up with Luke, right? That he's just kind of unaware of the ancient context, that like this structure of the Ark of the Covenant was a common structure. That was not like unique. This like pagans would have a similar thing to where like between those two like throne guardians, they would put some like demon idol or something in between. And the idea is that, you know, because like how it says in Deuteronomy, you saw no form on the mountain, there is no form on the Ark of the Covenant, right? And then, of course, we have the incarnation to where God does reveal himself in a human form. And that, you know, that is the fulfillment of all those things.
And it's interesting because I don't see a lot of objecting to images themselves going on here. It seems to be really just a rejection of veneration and a kind of, you know, a kind of incredulous stare at the idea that you would be kind of asked to venerate images. But if one really wanted to apply the second commandment to the veneration of icons, you would have to apply it to their creation as well. You would have to throw out all images.
Yeah. It's like, oh, you can't bow to them, but you can make them.
Right.
That just doesn't make intuitively, just is a little silly.
Yeah.
I got a big $50 super chat from Zach. Guys, get the stream to 7K in super chats to unlock Alex Sorenstein Zionist apologetic streams only for the next 30 days. You guys heard it here, folks. That's it.
We should talk.
Yeah,
we should talk about what he says about John bowing to the angel and Peter receiving prostration from Cornelius.
But let me give Zach his the obligatory. Which one should I use? How about?
That's Gnostic. That's
what?
That's Gnosticism.
That's nasty.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it.
Theologian. They talk about their hermeneutics and they talk about their exegesis. Sounds like a bunch of diseases. Hermeneutics and exegesis.
You don't want to catch diseases, right? So let's go back to the video here.
God spends century after century after century dealing with the children of Israel, convincing them to stay away from those idols, to the point where, I mean, they have to be repeatedly exiled. They have to be conquered over and over and over again. You have the same kind of teachings in the New Testament. At the end of 1 John, you stay away from idols. Now you find out that, no, the apostles were doing it, even though you don't find them doing it anywhere. But trust me, bro.
Real quick, there's like already a bunch of verses that connect this, right? So even after the ascension, it says the apostles gathered and they worshiped at the temple, right? So like all those principles that apply to the tabernacle are the same ones that apply to the principle, and that's after, or to the temple, and that's after the incarnation. So easily debunked.
They were actually doing it. I can't prove it. But then now you're saying this is a salvation issue. You have to be doing this. If you read the Bible and think, no, I definitely am not, or I would just like to err on the side of caution. I don't see this anywhere, and it sounds like it's frowned upon. I'd rather be on the safe side and not do that. They say, no, you're.
Yeah.
Don't err on the side of caution when someone tells you not to look at the bronze serpent.
It's a good point. Yeah. It's like, is that the approach that we should be taking? Or is it just like, what's true? Like, what is probably most true?
Yeah.
Right. But yeah, that's, if you don't look at the bronze serpent, you're dead.
Yep.
Anathema. That's a lot. That's a lot to take their word on for all of that.
If this was a practice that God wanted us to do, why isn't it mentioned in any of the instructions we have, like the pastoral epistles in the New Testament? Paul gives a lot of detail on like who can be elders and even how church should run, but never once make sure you make some images.
Wow, $100 from Roof Life and guns and shit.
That's probably Macaulay Roofing again.
I was gonna say, how come all these roofing people they're so generous? I gotta go start a roofing business.
My good friend BB Netanyahu. Thank you so much. My little BB coming in clutch. Thank you so much, BB.
Yo, Godnet dude looking creepy for real. Am I lying? Pray for this man. Dude, honestly though, Yeah, I'll say a prayer for Ryan. I mean, absolutely, dude. Thank you very much for the very generous
Righteousness is
donations
the filthy
tonight.
rags before God, Daddy. That's gonna send you straight to hell, amen.
This comment that there's no instruction to make icons, I actually push back against it a little bit. I think if we're being honest about, what Roman customs actually entail, you have some things you have to kind of face down if you want to actually say, if you want to make the strong claim, like there's just no evidence. There's no evidence of icons being created in the New Testament. There's nothing at all that would indicate that. Here's something to consider. Phrases like "give honor where honor is due." What would that mean in a Roman context? Because one of the typical ways of honoring somebody was to create their portrait, and if they passed on, you would show acts of honor to their portrait. I would not be so quick to just say like there's literally nothing there in the New Testament that would lead us in this direction. On the contrary, there's a sustained, if transformed, culture of honor that the church inherits from its Old Testament roots and from its Roman influences. Think of the fact that St. Paul's a Roman citizen. The idea that you can just firmly say, oh, he would never sit for his portrait to be painted or something like that, I would not be assuming that. I would, if anything, given what it would mean for a Roman person in the first century, I would assume that giving honor where honor was due probably would entail at least an openness to things like the creation and veneration of a portrait of a person. So I don't buy this, but I realize that's a little bit more of a complicated argument. You already kind of need to accept certain Orthodox assumptions in order to get there. So I guess we can keep going.
Yeah, well, this is like 1 Peter, I think, 1 Peter chapter 2. It says, honor everyone, love the brotherhood, fear God, honor the emperor. Boom! Right.
Yeah, and honoring the emperor, it wasn't just this kind of abstract, like, yeah, say hooray emperor, or something like that. The typical way that an emperor would display his presence throughout the cities of the Roman Empire was by means of his portraits. And there were acts of veneration that would be done to those portraits. There were also acts of idolatry that some emperors wanted done to their portraits, and Christians said no to that. But there were also more simple things like placing a garland on top of an emperor's portrait. This act of crowning or lighting a candle in front of it that wouldn't be seen as sacrificial or idolatrous. And if you really understand what they mean by, things like fear God, honor the emperor, you would probably take the kind of view that Origen takes, that the imperial portrait is to be accorded this respect, which passes through to the prototype, namely the emperor. So,
yeah.
Make sure you bow down to them. Make sure you kiss them. Otherwise, you're going to hell if you don't do that. Nothing in that sort.
So John bows down to an angel. Angel says, don't do that to me. Do that to God. People do the same thing with Peter, with Paul. They all have the same reaction. What are you doing? What are you doing? Get up. We're men. Stop doing that. Do that to God. Nicaea 2 uses the word proskuneo for what they do with images. Just think about this. You've got Peter and Paul and an angel saying, do not do that to us. You only do that to God. And there could be other contexts for the word where you're just bowing down out of respect and so on. But if it's in a religious context, it's normally translated as worship. So you have them in the Greek, in the New Testament, saying, do not proskuneo to us, only do that to God. And then you have in Nicaea 2, if you do not proskuneo to these icons, anathema. And so, wait a minute, I'm not supposed to do this, show this kind of reverence to the Apostle Paul, but I'm required to do it to an image of the Apostle Paul. And I can't do this to the Apostle Peter. Peter said, don't do that to him, but I can do that to an image of Peter.
Yeah, Michael, does the word proskuneo, is that used in the Bible consistently throughout in the same way?
Doesn't seem like it's used in exactly the same sense.
In every circumstance.
Yeah. So for instance, I mean, at the beginning of Luke's gospel, the devil tries to tell Jesus to give him proskinesis, to bow down to him. And Jesus says, bow down to the Lord your God and serve him only.
Based.
And you might think from that you might think from that statement that there's no cases whatsoever in which proskinesis could be given to anyone or anything other than directly to God himself without any intermediaries whatsoever. But we've already seen that the ark and the temple received proskinesis, and it's repeatedly stated in the Psalms. But even within the New Testament itself, I believe it's Revelation 3:9 that says that Jesus says to that particular church, I will bring those of the synagogue of Satan and have them proskinesis at your feet.
Uh-oh. Oh, no.
This firm attitude of there's no bowing ever, and this attachment to just the word proskinesis, it ends up undermining the case against the veneration of holy images and against the veneration of the saints. Yeah, there's Revelation 3:9 to consider. I will make them come and bow down before your feet.
Yeah, and this is Jesus talking. Jesus is saying, I will make them come down and bow down before your feet.
Yeah. So how does one address then the two incidents in Revelation where the Apostle John is corrected by the angel? And how does one address the situation that happens with Peter and Cornelius? Well, the situation with John and the angel, and it happens two times, and it's approximately the same wording in both cases. Alex, I don't know if you could bring in a clutch quote right now from the scriptures for me, because I don't have it in front of me.
Which one?
Let's go with the quotes from Revelation. One of the quotes from Revelation where John is told to stand.
Yes,
by the angel.
Give me 1 second.
There's a hint that we see about what's going on here, even just in the wording of the quote itself, that kind of clarifies why there's an instruction not to bow in this case. And it can be taken in a couple of different ways potentially. One direction that you can take this language of fellow servant, one direction you can take it in is that St. John has misidentified the angel as Christ. That's a possible interpretation that one could hold. I think St. Augustine held that view. I'm getting some of this from a gentleman named Orthodox Philip, who I don't agree with everything he says, but he's got a good video about these passages. Smart guy. So then I fell at his feet to worship him, but he said to me, do not do that. I am a fellow slave with you and your brothers who have the witness of Jesus. Worship God, for the witness of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy. So this proskinesis that's being offered to this angel, it seems like there's a reason that's given in the text itself for why this is not just not applicable to all cases of one person bowing to another. This emphasis on being a fellow servant. This is an angel saying this to the Apostle John. How can an angel say that he's a fellow servant alongside John? Well, one of the themes of the book of Revelation is the exaltation of humans to, sit on thrones in the kingdom of God. It's because the apostles have been exalted. They've been elevated in their status. They participate in the kingdom of God now in this unique and special way. They've been raised into the divine council. This is why they're being treated as on par with angels. We've been seated with Christ in the heavenly places. And there must have been, therefore, something about how John was bowing that made it kind of like inappropriate or disproportionate. There's like too much acknowledgement being given to the angel, as opposed to there being a kind of almost brotherliness about it. And this actually reminds me of, I think this is the first time that I met an Orthodox bishop. I was telling you about this earlier, Alex.
Yeah.
That's
a great story. Yeah.
People were in line to get the bishop's blessing, and I wasn't really clued into the fact that a bishop, he's not just your master, he's your father, and he's also a brother in Christ at the same time. So there's not this sense of servileness that you're supposed to have towards a bishop. If you're a lay person, you're supposed to be respectful. You're supposed to be, very respectful. But you don't act as though you're scum or something in front of a bishop. So I walked up to the bishop, and instead of, doing a courteous bow or something like that, I did like a full Matanya.
Full on
I was like,
Matanya, dude.
down.
This guy
And-
was.
And he basically did exactly like kind of what happens here. He was like, all right, get up. Like, don't do that. That's kind of according too much honor.
Uh-huh.
It's kind of like out of proportion. So anyways, I think some of the nuances of this and the fact that bowing can mean different things in different contexts, I think that's lost on people that kind of give up on the very idea of bowing itself. I think people that practice bowing will more naturally understand that there can be a different significance assigned depending on the situation.
Oh,
And
yeah,
depending
there are like instructionals on this for like if you're visiting Japan and a tourist to Japan, it's like you bow this much if you're saying I'm sorry, you bow this much if it's just a greeting, you bow this much if you cheated on your girlfriend and it's like the guy's laying flat on the floor.
Yeah. So I think that this helps kind of clarify what what's going on here. And then the other passage from Acts, it's Acts 10. Alex, if you could help us get there.
Yeah.
This is the one related to Cornelius and Peter. And I was looking at this one recently, and there's some kind of interesting, striking things about this passage that I hadn't noticed the first several times that I had read it. So, starting in the beginning of Acts 10, so it's interesting to consider that when the angel first appears to Cornelius, the way that Cornelius addresses him is Lord or Sir. Now, there's nothing necessarily improper about this. Angels get addressed as Kyrios or Lord in the Old Testament as well. There's nothing like inherently bad about it, but it's a little bit of like a kind of maybe slightly more formal or servile attitude than we often see when angels appear to New Testament figures such as Mary, our holy Theotokos, to the prophet Zechariah, to Saint Zacharias, the father of Saint John the Baptist. They don't respond by addressing the angel as Lord or Sir. There's not the same kind of self-lowering,
Self-deprecation. Yeah.
The only other time that I'm aware of in the New Testament that an angel gets responded to as Sir is St. John in Revelation. We've already seen that there's this sense of maybe excessive self-deprecation or a misunderstanding of a little bit more equality in John's case. The other thing that's interesting is that the instruction that the angel gives to Cornelius doesn't mention Jesus at all. It just says to go get Peter. And I think this is interesting to consider because you have to think in Cornelius's own mind about the fact that he's receiving like divine revelation. And this is kind of like maybe the most important experience of his life in a certain sense. And the instruction is to go find Peter, a man named Peter. If I were in that situation, I think I would probably at least form some kind of initial assumption that this Peter person is going to be kind of like the be all end all. He's like my final kind of goal in life is to find this guy. He has everything for me. There might be this kind of presumption that like this is the ultimate person that God has been kind of leading us towards or gesturing us towards. And
an angel appears to him and says, dude, this Peter guy is really important. Tell him to come over here. Right.
Yeah. So then later on when Peter actually reaches Cornelius, he does bow to the ground. And it's interesting because we've already talked about how in St. Luke's gospel, there seems to be this association between proskinesis and a worship that is only supposed to be given to God. But in this case, when you get to Cornelius bowing, it uses the language of proskinesis to describe how he greets Peter. And Peter's response is, stand up, I too am just a man. So I think the most natural way to take this is it's not a prohibition against bowing. It's very specifically picking out something either about how Peter bowed or the intent with which he bowed. This is the only way to resolve the fact that we see repeatedly in the scriptures that there's nothing wrong with bowing to holy persons. We saw that in Revelation 3:9. There's even an incident in Luke's gospel in Luke 24. The myrrh-bearing women, they fall on their faces in front of the two angels that appear to them at the empty tomb. And it doesn't use the word proskinesis to describe this, but later on in that same chapter, it does use the word proskinesis to describe the worship given to Christ as he ascends into heaven. So I would speculate, I'm not claiming to be an expert about these things, but it seems at least possible that St. Luke uses this word in a more specific and narrow way. He uses it to specifically talk about how you're supposed to relate to God, but has other ways of talking about legitimate bowing to holy persons. And I think that whether that's the correct way of resolving the apparent contradiction or not, regardless, you can't say that all proskinesis is only for God. Revelation 3:9, we already saw that that's not the case. So
yeah, exactly. I think another important thing about that kind of hints to that interpretation here for Acts 10 and Peter is that it says, Peter entered, Cornelius met him and fell at his feet and worshiped him. So it's not only falling at his feet. It's like he did something in addition to is falling at his feet, right?
Maybe, yeah. And I was talking to I was talking to a Greek expert about this, and I was kind of asking him about, like, isn't that kind of strange, because it says he like falls to his feet and he and worships him, or proskinesis, gives him proskinesis. We didn't really like necessarily reach. Well, he was saying that maybe it doesn't indicate anything more than just proskinesis, but I don't know about that one, but there does seem to be something about what's happening here it's not just bowing. There's something else that happened.
Yeah.
That's what's being picked out.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool.
So I think that kind of sums it up. I think that this video clip that is being put forward as like a nuke against orthodoxy or something like that, it's not. It comes from this. Things like this show that people, they're not as curious as they should be. Like, they should be like looking into these things more deeply and searching the scriptures. Like, if you believe what Jesus said, that we should search the scriptures because in them we'll find him.
Yeah.
If we believe that, then people need to be more open to the possibility of having scripture correct some of their assumptions. It's not as apologetically convenient. It's not as convenient for the purpose of polemics to have to kind of change your way of looking at things while wrestling with God, the words that God has given us. But that's what I would wonder. I would hope that Ryan and it's David, right? The other
David
guy?
Wood, yeah.
Yeah, David Wood. I hope that they see this and maybe reconsider. I don't think those arguments were good. I just don't think they were good.
Yeah, I think we have some super chats here for you, Michael, if you could answer those real quick, because I know you don't have all night. But Ryan Beamish, $5, says, can Michael talk about the word standard that Paul uses in Galatians for icon veneration of Christ?
I don't know if I am aware of the word standard being used in Galatians. What I do know is that in Galatians 3:1, there is a word, I believe it's prographo, that can be translated depicted. It can be used for talking about something being vividly described, but there's this repeated reference in Galatians 3:1 to the eyes that doesn't really seem to fit very naturally with saying that this is just talking about a vivid description or something. Like, Galatians 3:1 says that before your very eyes, Jesus Christ was publicly portrayed as crucified. And before that, it says, St. Paul says, "O foolish Galatians, who has bewitched you?" And that word for bewitched, it specifically means who has used the evil eye on you. So there's this.
That's interesting.
There's this many-fold reference to sight and vision in Galatians 3:1, and then we have this word that means it very much can mean, at least, depict like in a visual manner, depict in an image. This is why not only the scholar of early Christian material culture, gosh, the guy's name is escaping me. Bruce Longenecker. He thinks that this cannot just be talking about words. He thinks at the very least St. Paul has to have formed some sort of a gesture with his body that visually depicted the cross. But he also says this could very well be talking about a cross or a crucifix. And the same suggestion is accepted by N.T. Wright as well. N.T. Wright, no less a Protestant biblical scholar than N.T. Wright, says that you really should not rule out. He doesn't decisively come down in favor of it, but he definitely says you can't rule out, you should not be skeptical of this being a reference to a depiction of, and I think he says, the crucified Christ, as opposed to even just a cross. So there's something going on there in Galatians 3:1 that I think a person that wants to say no icons in the New Testament, no icons, you have to deal with it.
Yeah.
And one more thing about it, notice St. Paul's surprise. He's surprised that the Galatians have had the evil eye used on them. Why is he surprised? He's surprised because Christ was publicly portrayed crucified in front of them. Well, that would seem to suggest that there's something about the portrayal of the crucified Christ that would ward off evil. And that would mean that this is an apotropaic use of this depiction of Christ. It was seen as affording spiritual protection. So all of that stuff that Orthodox say about the cross being a protection, the sign of the cross being protection, have a cross in your home, wear a cross around your neck, all of that stuff that we say, that all seems to be rooted there in the New Testament itself. There's something there that we can trace back to the very beginning.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Volpe says, is Origen saying Christians don't use images the same cult statue referent Michael is referring to? The commandment against images.
Yeah. And Origen makes clear which kinds of what he has in mind when he says no temples, altars, and images. He makes it clear what he has in mind because he elsewhere speaks about so first of all, the word that's used is, I think it's agalmata. It's like for statue specifically. It's not icon or something like that. It's not images in general. And then later on, he talks about how Christians have within themselves the images of virtue. So this is talking about a spiritual sense of images. And then he says, as opposed to lifeless images full of evil spirits that are greedy to like receive gifts. That's a reference to idolatry. So when Origen is talking about agalmata, when he's talking about Christians not having temples, altars, and images, which is to say statues, he's thinking of idols specifically. And the person that wants to say that he's not, they have to come up with a better way of reading it based on the context and based on Origen's actual words that he selected. So anyways.
Yeah. D-Sign with $10 says, Michael, it was a pleasure to hear you the other day, even though it was with Luke. Loving your book, Early Icons. $10. Thank you, D-Sign. Appreciate that.
This topic, it still has a lot of traction. It still has a lot of traction. This is something that I think Orthodox need to be prepared for, and they need to be able to meet these objections with sincere and unfeigned love for our enemies, to the extent that we can muster that, but also with lots of facts, like being aware, like having a lot of knowledge about these things. If I do not recommend people try and talk to others about this without looking into it somewhat deeply themselves. I probably got some stuff wrong, by the way, in my book. In fact, I can think of a couple of things off the top of my head, but a lot of it seems to be standing up to the test of time. And I think it's a resource that people can use. And if you want even more of the same, join me on June 14th. So
Michael's he's going to publish his retractions. Austin Tom sent $5, said pin the link to Michael Garten's course. I did, guys. Check it out. It's also, so it's pinned. It's also in the description of the video. Just want to make sure I got all of the super chats for you. I've been looking for a new course with Saint Athanasius. This is awesome. $5 from Jalen.
Ben,
Yeah.
I'm sorry for talking so much. I apologize. I ate up all the air. Oh,
That's all good.
Vulpus says I had a second $5 super chat that was missed. I'm not going in order, but if I can you say it? Can you say it again in the chat, please? Sorry.
How could
I just
you,
go
Alex?
based off of what StreamYard gives me. I don't know. I don't think Vulpus had enough. I don't think they venerated Israel enough.
Very true.
Faith of the First Order, $2 says Ruslan, new shirt, monetize ministry. But is it an online class?
yes. Online and recorded. So if you don't want to be listening to me yap on a Sunday afternoon or Sunday evening, you can just listen to the recording later. If you actually are there while it's on Zoom, you get to ask, questions and stuff like that. But you can always find me online and bug me anyway. So
Yeah. Okay, Michael, you got to go.
I do.
All right. Thanks for coming on,
Meet you.
dude.
Thanks for having me on, Alex. Good
Yeah.
talking to you guys.
Absolutely.
Later.
Later.